I've been wanting to talk about also for a long time. I haven't actually done it on the show, but I want to talk about it because Star Wars is one of the stories that and lores that I'm a huge fan of. I'm a Star Wars guy. I am. I'm a May the Fourth be with you and all of that kind of stuff. and all of that kind of stuff. But in Star Wars, so what I want to talk about today with it are the top, what I see as the top 8 fights in all of Star Wars that's been, put on to either movies or TV shows or animated series. I know there's a lot of fights that are in the novels, but they haven't been animated, so I'm going to strictly leave it to that. Places that, even casual fans can go and find and look up and maybe, have already seen before. So I'm going to strictly base it on those things. No matter what type of Star Wars fan you are, whether you're the older Star Wars were the better ones or the prequels were actually better, or even if you're one of those super rare fans who thought the sequels were pretty okay. I think these 8 fights, though, I don't think anybody can disagree with as being some of the best that we saw in Star Wars. So let me start off with my number 8 fight, and this fight was between Sidious and versus Maul and Savage Opress. This fight happened in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So for anybody has not seen Star Wars: The Clone Wars when it came out all those many years ago, it's on Disney Plus. So if you still have a Disney Plus account, definitely go watch it. The whole series is great. If you don't have Disney Plus, obviously, you could YouTube this fight. It's on YouTube, so you can look it up. But Star Wars: The Clone Wars, that animated series, actually kind of put the bridge between what we saw in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clone Wars, and Episode 3, which was the Revenge of the Sith. It kind of bridged those two together. But in this fight between Sidious, Maul, and Savage Opress, you saw basically Maul, the apprentice, former apprentice to Darth Sidious, with his brother, also his new apprentice, Savage Opress, going up against Sidious in Mandalore. So essentially, Sidious saw Maul and Savage Opress as a rising threat potentially to his empire, and he went to go handle up and basically defeat them. The choreograph in the fight was amazing. I love to see 2 Sith fight. I mean, you would have to go to Star Wars: The Old Republic, the video game, and see some cutscenes, or again read the novels to really even get any of that type of action. But I thought this fight was really cool. It really displayed the gap between Sidious and Maul and Savage Opress, to be honest with you. And yeah, it kind of also made you feel a little bit of pity for Darth Maul. I'll be honest with you. It was the first time I was like, man, that dude just can't catch a break. But that's my number 8 fight in all of Star Wars. My number 7 fight was between Count Dooku versus Anakin and Obi-Wan, the first fight in Episode 2, Attack of the Clone Wars. So, Count Dooku, former Jedi Master who turned Sith Lord, if you will, ended up fighting Anakin and Obi-Wan towards the end of Episode 2, once they found out that, Dooku was the one who actually was, the leader of the Separatists and all of that. And so they went to try and take him down. In this fight, we got to see how Dooku as a duelist was simply on a different level, but it also got to show Anakin and how, as a prodigy, he could ultimately become as powerful as what, Darth Sidious and others thought he could be. The fact that he was able to hang in there with Dooku for a little bit before, he got his hand chopped off, really showed it. It also showed that even though Obi-Wan and everybody, likes him and respects him, how as a duelist, Dooku was one of the best in the Jedi Order, and a lot of when you read the novels and stuff actually talked about him being on par with like Yoda and Mace Windu and even Plo Koon and people like that who were just expert duelists, and he really showed it in this fight. That's my number 7 fight. My number 6 fight in all of Star Wars, which I think actually gets kind of underratedly slept on, was Mace Windu versus Darth Sidious in Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3. So it's one of my favorite scenes when Windu walks in and Sidious is like, Master Jedi, take it, General Grievous has been defeated. And Windu basically says, basically you're under arrest, my lord. And at that point, it was on. And the thing that makes this fight underrated is that a lot of people think that Windu didn't win that fight. But as a Star Wars person, we all know one of Mace Windu's abilities is called Shadow Point, which allows him to use the opponent's dark side energy against them, which actually allows him to overpower dark side users. And this is exactly what happened with Sidious. I know a lot of people will think that Sidious let him do it so that way Anakin can, so that way he can have his time to betray him and everything like that and betray the Jedi, but I don't think so. I really think he actually had Sidious beat. I mean, even George Lucas said as much that, Windu basically won that fight. And I think it really put on display just how powerful Mace Windu was, because up until that point, I don't think a lot of people actually understood just how powerful Mace Windu is, and this fight really showed it. So that's my number 6 Star Wars fight. I've actually rewatched it several times, so one of the best out there. My number 5, moving on to my number 5 Star Wars fight is and was between Ahsoka Tano and Darth Maul. This fight happened in Star Wars The Clone Wars, the final season. So, Ahsoka, a fan favorite of the Star Wars community, who her new show comes out here in a little bit, so kind of interested in seeing what they do with that. But in any case, ended up finding herself on Mandalore and ran into Darth Maul. During this fight, what made it so cool was Ahsoka had actually already left the Jedi Order because they actually accused her of basically treason. Till later she was acquitted, and when they tried to accept her back, she didn't want to go back, and I don't blame her because, you just told me I was a treasonous traitor, so I don't want to go back neither. But anyway, she left the Order, and she wasn't with them anymore, and obviously Maul had escaped from Sidious, because this was after Sidious came and attacked him and basically captured him at the time. But he had escaped, and both of them ran into each other kind of with the same idea in mind, but Maul wanted Ahsoka to join him, and she was like, nah, I ain't gonna do that. So Maul was like, all right, well then I guess you just gotta die. So their duel was great. It had a lot in it, from battling in the throne room to battling out on basically a beam, and Ahsoka kind of getting the upper hand on Maul, allowing him basically to be captured by the Republic again. Yeah, it was a great fight right before Order 66 happened, and again, not only is Star Wars The Clone Wars a must-watch from a storytelling standpoint, they had some of the cooler fights that you will see in all of Star Wars. So if you don't want to go watch it, you can Google Ahsoka versus Maul on YouTube and you can see the fight. Very, very good fight. My number 4 fight in all of Star Wars was between, again, Darth Maul, he's popular in a lot of these, ain't he? Versus Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And this was in episode 1 of Phantom Menace. So I remember when episode 1 came out and I skipped school to see it. Statute of limitations over with, people I did. But anyway, went to see it, and I remember when Darth Maul showed up on scene, he was like, who is this cat? Who is this dude? The dude looked menacing. He looked like a Sith, and that fight he had between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan was something else. I remember the end, Duel of Fates came, Maul pulled out the double-ended lightsaber, and you just like, what? That's crazy. And the back and forth between the three of them was great. And then obviously Maul ultimately getting the upper hand on Qui-Gon Jinn once he got separated from Obi-Wan, seeing Qui-Gon, basically get stabbed and die. Back when, lightsabers actually, if you got stabbed with it, you would die, versus how in these new episodes you get stabbed by a lightsaber. Oh, you're fine, you'll live. But in any case, to get back to the fight, it was a great fight. Obviously, it saw the rise of Obi-Wan and how him being a Padawan and him being able to outsmart Maul and cut him in half and get an upper hand on him. The fight was amazing, and in my opinion, Darth Maul has been responsible for a lot of the great fights in Star Wars, and this one was certainly his best. So that's my number 4 Star Wars fight. Let's go to my number 3 Star Wars fight. And this one, for whatever reason, I don't see it get this type of love that I think it deserves. And for two of, basically one master of the dark side and one master of the light, you would think it would get more love. But for some reason, when I see people talk about greatest fights, it really never comes up. And that's between Master Yoda and Darth Sidious. This fight happened in Revenge of the Sith, episode 3. So this fight, I'm telling you right now, I think I've rewatched this fight more than any fight in all of Star Wars for a couple of different reasons. Yes, the fight itself, though on screen was brief, it was still pretty breathtaking. And on top of that, it dropped some of the coldest lines that you will see, especially from Yoda, when Sidious tried to get, when Sidious, shot him with that lightning and was like, I've been waiting for this moment, my little green friend, with his, crazy laugh. And then Yoda pushed him away and said, at your roll in and not short enough it was, to Sidious trying to run away. Then Yoda cutting him off and then tell him it's so powerful you are, why leave? Boy, if that ain't a line, that's almost like mic drop. Like, hey, look, man, you say you're about it. Why you trying to run? That fight was super underrated. It actually kind of showed the difference and gap between, or the different ideology, if you will, between Yoda and Sidious, or the light and the dark side too. And here's what I mean by that. Yoda and the Jedi were all into lightsaber combat and making sure you're proficient with that. Sidious, though he knew all 7 lightsaber forms, thought that a true person in the Force was more powerful by their ability to actually use Force abilities more so than the lightsaber. So even though, and again, we didn't get to see it, but in the novel, Yoda kind of bested him in lightsaber combat. But then Sidious basically grabbed the upper hand through his use of the Force, and we saw that in the movie where he was throwing freaking, pods that the Senate members used to use at Yoda, to Yoda, throwing it back at him, catching when they're throwing it back at him. Sidious using Force lightning and all of that stuff that ultimately, got him the high ground, as Obi-Wan would say, ultimately winning the fight. So again, very underrated fight. I wanted to put it number 1, but I couldn't, because these other 2 fights are just better and I think more significant in Star Wars. But that one definitely deserved to be in my 3rd spot. 2nd spot, a fight that, in my opinion, was more significant, even though you could maybe say wasn't as, tactical, if you will, was the Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker fight, the first fight that they had in The Empire Strikes Back. So, and that was episode 5. Even though this fight was kind of, you could say it was kind of sloppy. I mean, Luke had got a little training from from Master Yoda, but obviously not nearly enough that he should have had. So a lot of his lightsaber combat was kind of clunky looking, and Vader just completely just overpowered him with the Force, throwing stuff at him and stuff like that. And ultimately, basically got the upper hand on him, cut off his hand, almost like when Dooku cut off his hand when he was Anakin, right? And so The reason why this fight ranked so high was because of the significance in what it played in the storyline. This was the fight that led up to, that famous moment that everybody says, Luke, I am your father, right? That whole thing. And Luke thinking, what is not possible? And he freaked out and then ended up, letting himself down that shaft. But it really, really, really set up a pivotal moment in Star Wars. I don't think the fight itself was as good as even that Yoda Sidious fight, but the significance of it is why it ranks so high. It's why a lot of people have gone back, and it's probably one of the most rewatched Star Wars fight in all of, the lore. So Vader versus Luke Skywalker in the first fight, I have this high. And before I get to my number one fight in all of Star Wars that I have a couple of honorable mentions that I just want to give a shout out to. Won't dive deep into them, but just want to give a shout out because these were also really, really good fights that if you have not seen them, again, you should definitely go look it up. One of them is the Ahsoka versus Darth Vader fight in Star Wars Rebels. This might have been the best fight in Rebels, in my opinion. It very, very well probably was. And it's highly underrated. It really, really, the cinematography with it is a really good fight. So that fight deserves an honorable mention. The next one was Luke versus Darth Vader the second time in Return of the Jedi. And this was when, Vader eventually turned to the light side, if you will, turned back to the light, saved his son Luke from Sidious frying him up like he was some bacon. That fight, I know some people may have it, in their top, may have had it in their top 8, but I didn't have it in mind, but I thought it definitely deserved an honorable mention. The next fight that I have in my honorable mentions list was Obi-Wan versus General Grievous in Revenge of the Sith. I thought the fight was pretty cool. I know a lot of people didn't like the fact that Obi-Wan ended up winning with a blaster, right? And how he beat Grievous that way. But look, man, a win's a win. He kind of overpowered him with the Force and in lightsaber combat, to be honest with you. He only lost because, Grievous is a robot, was a cyborg anyway, with cybernetic enhancements. And, it's kind of hard to, punch and hit that kind of stuff. But anyway, still thought that fight deserves an honorable mention as well. And then last, but certainly not least on my honorable mentions list was Rey and Kylo Ren versus the Imperial Guards in The Last Jedi, Episode 8. So, for anybody out there who's a fan of the new sequels, if you will, 7, 8, and 9, here's your love, because this was certainly the best fight in that entire franchise. In the entire franchise, that was the best fight. And I have to admit, the choreography was great. Her and Rey and Kylo really teaming up, a light side and a dark side user, the first time we've ever seen that in history, in a fight. I know Vader and Luke did it when, Vader threw Sidious and all of that, but that wasn't a fight. He kind of snuck Sidious and threw him off, but you get what I'm saying. But that fight, though, definitely the best in all of the later sequels. So I wanted to give it some love. I know a lot of people in the Star Wars community think I'm a hater on the newer ones. Well, yes, I am, because they're not good. But this fight, though, was actually really good. So I wanted to give it an honorable mention. But to circle back to my number one fight that I feel in all of Star Wars was, is, and probably always will be Obi-Wan versus Anakin, Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3. That fight had everything. The back and forth, the use of force powers, the just efficient, ultra skilled lightsaber combat. It had everything to it. It was that good. Much like I talked about with my number 2 pick and how it played a pivotal role in the franchise and in the development of the story. Obviously, Anakin turned into the dark side, having to be confronted by his master. ultimately for his master to beat him because he had the high ground. He tried to warn him, and Anakin getting sliced up like Wonder Bread towards the end there. And then in that passionate speech that Obi-Wan gave, you are my brother. I love you. How many times have we wanted to tell that, to somebody that, we felt done us wrong, right? But in any case, that obviously further pushing Anakin. I mean, he was already there, but really, really cemented him in the dark side and him ultimately becoming Vader because of his body being dismembered and turning into the cybernetic cyborg that we saw later on in the series. This is why I have this fight number one, and I don't think anybody can argue otherwise.